If I'd have had any inkling that that was going to happen that day, I wouldn't have stopped. Supernatural is a good way that I would describe it. It stood up beside the rock on the top of the waterfall. It opened its mouth and was yelling at us.
I know what I saw. It walked across the road in front of us, just disappeared.
He saw it swing its arm up and move the tree. It stopped us dead in our tracks.
It was big and hairy.
Be careful, because there is something there. Knowing that there's other people out there that have experienced it helps. For the love of God, please don't take this lightly. That whatever is there is aggressive. People go into the Pilliga and they just don't come out.
The Pilliga, the wild, untouched lands of Western New South Wales, with pretty much more mysteries than the rest of Australia combined. To be fair, we'd been warned not to spend a night here. But before we tell you what we experienced that night in the Pilliga, I want to go back to where this all started. Australia, a vast nation that boasts many different cultures. And with that comes many different stories. The Grampians puma or the Lithgow panther. There's countless Indigenous stories that talks of the bunyip that terrorises the Australian waterways. But arguably the most well-known is the Australian Yowie. Is there 10-foot, 200-kilo gorillas that live in the Australian wilderness that are very rarely ever seen? I don't think so. But the amount of stories that come forth, they got to make you wonder.
We'd walked along the trail when we heard the bellow come out of nowhere. It just sort of pulled us all up in our tracks and we all sort of stopped dead. And by this stage, the girls come clambering out of the water and, they're all screaming, what was that? And it just echoed and echoed. And it was guttural and it was quite forceful and quite aggressive. There was just this snap of the trees, and I stopped and looked around and I could see at the top of the fall these trees bending and snapping and this thumping that you could feel the earth vibrate.
Known as Bigfoot or the Yeti in other parts of the world, the Yowie is estimated to stand between 8 and 10 feet tall. They're said to be well built and have a strong stench.
So we're on our way to Hickeys Falls, which is just west of Coonabarabran, and pretty crazy story where this woman and her kids saw massive Yowie at the top of the waterfall and chased them and roared at them, and so we're going to go have a look at that.
And this is where the Hickeys Falls incident happened, and Ben's just gone up with the gorilla suit to try and reenact the scenario where this woman's come here with her kids, and she's heard this incredible heart-thumping roar and looked up and seen a Yowie at the top of the falls. The claim is that the Yowie was similar height to the rock you're seeing up there on top of the waterfall. And if that's the case, that rock is massive. The thing must be at least 10 foot or more.
First of all, we wanted to rule out the possibility of whether or not this could have been someone in a costume.
She reckons the Yowie was as tall as this rock. You're not even like halfway up it. The claim is that the Yowie jumped from here. It took 3 steps to get from here across the falls and into that bush. So Yowie shook this tree. He's gone nuts here, and then he's taken 1, 2, 3 steps and straight over into the bush. There is no way a person in a gorilla suit has done that.
It's easily a 20-metre drop to the bottom of the waterfall.
You wouldn't jump it in the suit, would you?
I would let him move.
And then it's followed her along the ridge line, shaking and breaking trees.
As I was coming around the back of the car to get in the driver's seat, it's when we smelt this smell that was just completely overpowering. It was nauseating and was like rotting flesh, but it was sickly sweet smell. It was just a smell I'd never encountered.
So much mystery that surrounds this story, and it's so intriguing. There's a few other parts to it that I haven't mentioned yet, and the first of those being there was actually another car present in the car park the day this incident took place. So this particular car had all its doors open, there was rubbish on the ground, there was jerry cans, there was an esky on the ground that was smashed to pieces, there was camping chairs. Who did this car belong to? Where were the owners? And why were all their belongings spread out all over the ground? One of the other interesting aspects of this story is it happened only metres from a major highway, but there was at least one other witness. The story takes an unexpected turn after the woman is pulled over by police after driving erratically while leaving the area. The police have also heard about this abandoned car.
He said to me, I've had reports of an abandoned car, and I just remember looking at him going, don't go down there, there's something there, it's going to be in the car park. please don't go down there. And he said, is the car there? And I said, yes, but don't go down there. It's in the car park. And I just drove off.
Moments later, they noticed the same police officer hauling up behind them on the road.
And this police officer, just the same police officer that had flashed his lights at me, come flying along the highway behind us and just overtook me. We all looked as he went around. The kids were going, did you see him? Did you see the look on his face? He looked scared. The only thing I was ever told, the police in Coonabarabran told me a couple of weeks later that he returned to the office and he was shaking and white. He sat in the break room with a cup of coffee. He never said a word to anybody about what he saw, and he went on leave. By all accounts, he left the police force not long after and never returned.
A story so backwards and so out of this world that surely it has to be made up. But with a story like this so detailed, it's hard pushed to believe it's made up.
It's the boots that give it away.
Yeah.
That is the sign of a real Yowie right there. What do you think? Could a 10-foot, 9-foot creature hide in there? You were pretty well hidden when you were a distance away.
Was I?
When you were right up there, you could see you zoomed in.
Yeah.
But it's still, I don't know if it's thick enough to hide a fully grown Yowie.
I guess if they're primates though, they're a bit smarter than your average animal.
We might just chuck it up here somewhere in a tree. We'll come back in a couple of hours and see if we've got some action.
Coming up, we head to Texas, USA to learn tips and tricks as to how to find Bigfoot and see if that applies to looking for Yowies in the Australian wilderness. And later.
Did you hear that? What the frig was that?
So we're just looking for any items of distinction, any points of interest, you know, trees being bent over, stuff like that, that may be an indication that there's a Yowie in this area.
So the best part is you send the drones up. If you see anything of interest, you mark it on the map and you hike in and have a look later. We're on our way to Texas, USA to head out on an expedition with the Texas Bigfoot hunters to see if any of their tips and tricks might work on the Australian Yowie. And these guys are serious about Bigfooting, or squatching as they call it. Check out the grill of this truck. And it didn't take long into our first night to hear some crazy howls in the Texas backcountry. And just about everyone had a story that they were willing to share.
There's the date on the bottom, May 19th, 2012.
And is that when you saw Bigfoot?
That was the day that things that aren't supposed to exist, I saw, and everything changed from there. We were hiking about 6 miles in. Now my cousin is like, oh my God, there's a Bigfoot right there, and he has a camera around his neck. And he's trying to take a picture of what he's seeing. What it was is there was this bush, and it was standing behind the bush. And when my cousin saw it, he saw it first, I didn't see it yet. When he saw it and he goes, there's a Bigfoot, and he starts running towards it, it just went straight down. I just see my crazy cousin running towards this bush, and then I see this hand start coming out from the side of the bush, and then this shoulder, and it grabbed the tree, and then it pushed off on that tree, and it kind of stood up, and then it went down. And it was like real shiny black hair.
They showed us a bunch of things to look out for, but also how to try and communicate with these elusive beasts.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Ooh. Ooh.
There's a lot of people who believe that that the Sasquatch communicate with one another by hitting tree knocks. And we go out there in the woods and we want to make a tree knock, what they basically call them, and we usually just do it twice. And you'd be amazed at how far that carries. A few years ago, we had stopped and there was a picnic table. And we was eating there and there was a nail sticking up out of the picnic table. And I had a hammer in the back of the truck. So I went out there and I hit that nail a couple of times. And as soon as I put the hammer down, I heard a knock out in the woods. And I don't know whether it was answering it or what, you know. I didn't even pay attention to it. She said, "You hear that?" I said, "Yeah."
So we've come back to Hickeys Falls. It's now just after dark, and we thought we'd do a bit of a night sort of a investigation here at Hickeys Falls. We're gonna do a couple of calls. We're gonna play some audio recordings that we got from Texas, and just hang out here for a couple of hours. This is the spot where the notorious Yowie chased her all the way from the falls to the car. So we're gonna hang out here until well after dark, into the wee hours of the morning, and we're gonna see if we can get some action out here at Hickeys Falls.
I am up here on my own, but it hasn't deterred me from wanting to play this sound of one of the Bigfoots we recorded when we were in Texas last year. So I'm going to play it through this speaker. I'm going to try and jack it up as loud as I can. All I can hear is falls.
Because of the sheer noise of the waterfall, we decided to hike a bit further into the wilderness to attempt some wood knocks and calls. Coming up. And later.
It literally sounds like there's something out there right now, mate.
We've hiked into the woods above Hickeys Falls to try and get some responses from local Yowies, using some of the skills we'd learned in Texas.
Ben's just answering my knocks to see if we can encourage these beasts to start tapping on some wood.
I can't even make the sound that I've heard. I've tried.
You tried to do it.
I've tried to do it. I can't even. Yeah, you're way better than I would be.
That is an echo. Here, if we have a listen, these are the sounds that. Let me just find it. So this is the sound of the ones we recorded in Texas last year.
I decided to take a different approach and be a bit more aggressive.
And after doing a little bit of research, it didn't prove hard to find stories of Yowie encounters right here in Australia, including cars being shaken, rocks being thrown at hikers.
Now, everyone we've talked to has said, whatever you do, don't camp in the Pilliga. Don't go anywhere near the Pilliga after dark. And we have a family connection who lives on the outskirts of the Pilliga, and we're going to go camping on their land. Despite what everyone says, we're going to go camp there, and we're going to try and find out if Yowies exist for real. We're going to do some calls. We got some audio recorders as well. We got a bunch of cameras. We're setting up trail cameras everywhere. If the Yowie exists, we're going to try and find it. We're going to try and prove it to the Australian people.
The amazing thing was the bulk of the stories we came across were eerily similar to the North American Bigfoot stories we'd also come across.
One of the stories we heard, don't know if you can understand me with that. One of the stories we heard was a woman saying that the Yowie ran across the road. It took 3 steps to clear this road. 1, 2, 3 to get to the other side. I'm going to attempt it in a Yowie suit. But if a Yowie can run across the road like that, in like 2 or 3 bounds, the thing is massive. I nearly tripped over just running across it. If a Yowie can do that in 3 steps, you know how big those things are?
It was time to head on to camp. It was important to get out there and get our trail cameras set up as soon as possible.
Just the name, Pilliga, makes you just...
Gives you the chills.
Gives you the chills.
So we've just set up the trail cam.
Many people had told us not to spend a night in the Pilliga. We were going to do it.
An amazing spot. just amazing part of Australia. You go online and you look up YouTube or something and you start seeing story after story after story, and they're all stories about the Pilliga Yowie. And you don't go into the Pilliga at night because the thing is psychotic. And it's not just about the Pilliga Yowie, they talk about the Pilliga princess as well. At the moment, it's quite calm, quite surreal here. I'm not having any issues here. I don't feel weird. Birds are chirping. I've got a good vibe about the place. But in about 10 minutes time, the sun will set, and that's probably when we're going to get a real idea of what is going on here in the Pilliga. Will we hear noises? We've got infrared cameras, we've got trail cameras set up. We've also got audio recorders. We've got a bunch of different things going on.
We managed to convince a local to tag along and share his story with us.
All out camping, just hear these trees shake. And they weren't little trees either. Nothing that a human could shake.
So that was a decent shake. It wasn't just like
it wasn't just a little shake. It wasn't the wind. It was a shake of the tree. A little while after, there was a real loud, high-pitched sound. It just bellowed out.
I'm amazed you game to camp out in the woods now.
I've never been game enough to come out here.
We knew it was serious when he refused to spend the night. We were now completely alone in the Pilliga. The signs of something big walking through the bush were everywhere.
Oh, that tree's fresh. Broke from the base. Do you reckon a hog could break it from the base?
Maybe.
It's been pushed from higher up.
Coming up.
Did you hear that?
What the frig was that?
And later.
He saw a terrible hairy beast outlined against the background of the sky, and he vowed never to stop in the Pilliga Scrub again.
We decided to hike down to one of our trail cameras dressed in a Yowie costume just to see what the quality of footage would look like if we actually got something. As we were nearing the camera, an almighty shriek echoed out around the area. Unfortunately, the cameras were not rolling and we missed this vital audio.
Did you hear that? What the frig was that?
We're just here doing demonstrations with him in the gorilla suit.
Definitely heard a weird noise.
There was a weird noise.
It sounded like a Yowie call, like what I've heard on YouTube.
Yeah, I didn't know.
It's sort of that like
You heard it, eh?
Yeah, it was like.
Ooh. Ooh. That noise, you heard that though,
I heard
right?
that noise. It didn't sound like what you just made, but.
Do you reckon you could mimic what it sounded like?
No, I tried. Sort of had a wavy tone to it, like a woo, like a. But it was a higher pitch than I can make with my own.
It was freaky, whatever it was.
Is it possible that such an animal could exist in the Australian wilderness undetected for so long?
Just going to try and do some more calls here on the loudspeaker. It's the middle of the night now, so we're going to try and get some rest and set up some audio recorders around. And hopefully we'll get some noise and some action. It already sounds like something's walking around the camp, and I've literally just zipped up my hood. It literally sounds like there's something out there right now, and I only just done up my hood. This is freaky.
And we definitely had the feeling we were not alone. We decided we needed to follow up some more on some of the stories we'd come across. In particular, a story about a truckie just outside of Coonabarabran.
The year would have been 1968 or 1969 when this incident occurred. What my dad describes here, when he started hitting the tyres with a mallet, found the inside tyre flat and started to jack his wheel up. He saw a terrible hairy beast outlined against the background of the sky. He said he could smell a strong odour coming from him, and it was something he would never forget. When he took off, he looked in the rearview mirror and he saw this ape-like animal running after the truck, grabbing the canvas. And he vowed never to stop in the Pilliga Scrub again.
What's the story of the young boy, if you don't mind me asking?
My son was out in the forest helping with fires, and they got word that a young boy from out Barradine had gone missing, and he was one that went out looking for the young boy. And they found him, I don't know where. All I know is that he was found on the side of the road, and he told them he was walked out. The young boy was about 8 at the time.
No one knows who the kid is?
No.
Off camera, we kept hearing a bunch of chatter about these brothers known as the Watkin brothers.
Those brothers. What's their story?
The Watkins?
Yeah, the Watkin boys.
The Watkin boys. Yeah, they're a couple of characters. Yeah, they certainly played some pranks on people out there on the Narrabri Road over the years.
Yeah.
You know, because they'd get dressed up and you know, fright, because whether it came from the story of the Yowie prior to that, you know, when they were kids and that, and they were probably, you know, taking advantage of that story of Yowies being out there to play pranks on people that have pulled up around that area, because it was a common place to pull up, you know, because basically their property, that was that would have been nearly the last property along the road till you nearly get, you know, within 20 or 30 kilometres from Narrabri.
Is it possible this whole thing was started by a group of brothers in the 70s and is nothing more than an elaborate prank on tourists that has become folklore over the years? And if all this is just a prank, how do you explain the more recent stories? Although geographically close, Hickeys Falls is closer to the Warrumbungles than the Pilliga, a region which locals say Yowies frequent. Or the stories of a Yowie being able to comfortably walk across the road in only 3 steps, which rules out a normal-sized man in a suit. Not to mention the vocalizations we heard in the bush.
This is freaky.
The question is it legit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I'd have had any inkling that that was going to happen that day, I wouldn't have stopped. Whatever's there's obviously been there a very long time, and it's somewhere that's very familiar to them, and obviously we just annoyed them that day.
At the end of the day, there's a huge amount of untouched Australian wilderness. Could something like a Yowie exist? Or is it the fear of the unknown, a man-made illusion that pushes our imagination outside the realm of rational thinking? Who really knows?
We found one! We found a Yowie! So we do have a Yowie suit out here. We don't know if that will entice them or not.
So you also remember the Watkin brothers then?
I did get to meet these two, and they were quite characters. Long hair, not real clean. I guess I can understand how they could be mistaken.